The more connected fans feel to their sports teams, the more likely they are to invest in it, whether it's tickets, gear, or souvenirs. Engage with fans by asking for their input on team decisions by getting a .vote team website. Visit GoDaddy.com today to get started.
Aaron Boone is a you problem. The WNBA arguments are missing a major point. The NFL quarterback who could start a new trend. All that and a whole lot more on a new episode of Gordon Damer on Sports. All right, welcome into another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports, back with a fresh episode number 27. So by now you should know the drill. Hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to us on. Rate it, share it, hit all the buttons. And of course, if you have already and are thinking, will this guy ever shut up about hitting subscribe? Just know that I appreciate it. All right, let's get into it. On today's episode, we'll touch on the Yankees' struggles, the confusion that is surrounding the WNBA's CBA deal, and perhaps a quarterback is making a major change in how he plays in the NFL. But first, I got to start off with a loss of an icon, a symbol of a time that feels like it does not exist anymore, because we got the news yesterday that Hulk Hogan has died. And for anyone who was a kid in the 80s, that news hit hard. The amount of people who reached out to me knowing that I was a big wrestling fan in the 80s was unbelievable, because Hulk Hogan, you have to understand, was not just famous. He made his sport famous. He didn't invent wrestling. That had existed long before him. But Hogan came along at the exact right moment, the perfect storm of cable television and the WWF's national expansion, the birth of WrestleMania. And it wasn't just a wrestling boom, it was a wrestling explosion. It was bigger than it had ever been before. And at the center of all of it was Hulk Hogan. He wasn't just part of it, he was the tentpole star the entire thing was built around. Now, you didn't need to be a wrestling fan to know who Hulk Hogan was. Your mom knew who Hulk Hogan was. But if you were a wrestling fan in the 80s, and I'll be honest with you, for the people who didn't grow up in the 80s, I don't know that I could adequately explain to you just what he meant. Not just to professional wrestling, not just to kids, but the culture. And while I understand in 2025 we live in a different time, it's more cynical, it's more divided, and that kind of has been what's disturbing me since the news came down yesterday. It's how some people, even in the wake of death, can't just sit one out. You know, not everything needs to be content. Not everything needs to be a snarky tweet on Twitter. People love to say that Hogan had a complicated legacy. He really didn't. It's not complicated. He was an incredible performer who was world famous, but he was not a good person away from the spotlight. That's not nuance. That's actually pretty common. Fame does not equal character, and by now we should know that. And if you can't separate death from politics, I don't know what to tell you. There are moments that you should take a step back, take a breath, and recognize magnitude. Whether you loved him or hated him or went back and forth over the years, Hulk Hogan was a figure of magnitude. He was wrestling. And I'm not saying that there weren't controversies or lawsuits or ugly headlines or damaging moments. He was not a perfect person. Generally, people are not perfect people. But when someone passes, I don't think that's the time to rehash all the worst moments of their life. And the idea that, oh, well, he spoke at the Republican National Convention. Wait a sec, you don't agree on politics with Hulk Hogan? Well, how about Ricky the Dragon Steamboat? Where does King Kong Bundy come down on the issues? What does it matter? I think that this time was a time to remember what they meant to you back when. So let's go back to the 80s, because if you weren't a kid during that time, you might not fully understand what that era felt like. The world wasn't always online. Wrestling wasn't everywhere, but yet Hulk Hogan was everywhere. This is the guy who was on the cover of Sports Illustrated back when that meant something. He was on Saturday Night Live. He was on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, the A-Team. He starred in Rocky III. He became a household name in every household, not just the ones watching wrestling. And the idea that a professional wrestler could become a pop icon, that all started with Hulk Hogan. He wasn't just a wrestler. He wasn't just a character. It was kind of like a movement. He told us to eat our vitamins and say our prayers, and whether it was going up against the Iron Sheik or Big John Studd or the $1 Million Man, Hogan wasn't just beating opponents. He was the character of good. And as ridiculous as that may look like now, in real time, it was electric. It was colorful. It was joyful. And that's what people kind of forget about the 80s. There was a spirit to it. Yes, it was over the top a little, but it was optimistic and maybe a little ridiculous, maybe a little bit plastic. But at the time, it was wonderful. And Hogan fit that era perfectly. He was that era. The handlebar mustache and the red and yellow gear, the Hulkamania shirts, coming to the ring and cupping his ear for the fans, the poses. Yeah, it was a different media landscape back then, but he was without a doubt one of the most instantly recognizable athletes on planet Earth. And if you were a kid who loved wrestling, you remember the moments. January 23rd, 1984, Hulk Hogan against the Iron Sheik at Madison Square Garden, the night that Hulkamania was born. It was absolute magic. Or WrestleMania 3 at the Pontiac Silverdome, where 93,000 people, or at least that's the number they told us, Hulk Hogan went up against Andre the Giant. The body slam of the Giant, that impossible moment when he scooped him up and threw him to the mat, and the crowd noise, it's deafening. Go back and watch it. You can hear the building shaking. And back in the 80s, professional wrestling wasn't sports entertainment just yet. It was kind of transitioning and still figuring out how big it could be. And Hogan was the bridge it was built on. And you know, if his career only lasted the 80s, that would be one thing. But move forward into the 90s. When things changed and wrestling changed, he changed. He moves over to the other wrestling organization, WCW, turns into Hollywood Hogan, starts the NWO, and that move reignited professional wrestling. Suddenly, Monday nights weren't just important, they were must-see TV. And Hogan was at the center of it all. And that transformation worked perfectly, and wrestling entered the Attitude Era, and Hogan was a big part of that. He helped push wrestling into the mainstream once again, more so than anyone ever has. And here's the thing about Hogan. Love him or hate him, you felt something about him. He was a character, and just like characters on scripted TV shows, you have to care about the character for the show to be good, right? The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, Mad Men. You have to care about that character. It's not just about the plot of the show. So look, Hogan was not the best wrestler. Everyone knows that. He had the same match basically for 40 years, but that's not what he was there for. He made you care. He made you watch. He put butts in seats. He sold pay-per-views. There was always a Hogan story. And I think at this time, it's a time to remember what that character meant. What Hulk Hogan meant to wrestling fans, to pop culture, and to an entire generation of fans was absolutely massive. He was professional wrestling, and that's Hulk Hogan's footprint. And I think you can recognize that without celebrating the person behind the character. Nobody anywhere is talking about Terry Bollea. They're talking about a fictional character, Hulk Hogan, and what that character meant to them. All right, let's get into the Yankees a little bit because they've been a hot topic with how they've played, and I got a really nice reaction to the episode we did a few weeks back about why the Yankees are the Yankees at this point, where they are and how they got there, and because this issue that's popped up here recently with how they've played and the problems they've had, I think it's clear cut. So Wednesday night's game was a new low point, right? 4 errors in 3 innings. They lost the Blue Jays 8-4. So they've now made, I think, 12 errors in 10 games against the Blue Jays, who are in first place in the team that the Yankees are chasing. So after the game, Aaron Boone asked about the defensive problems, and he gave his typical Aaron Boone type answer, which was, quote, "We are a very good defensive team." And of course, as soon as he said that, Yankee fans on Twitter went into a spiral because you knew that that was going to happen. Now, I'm going to say something here off the top that might annoy some Yankee fans, but it needs to be said for your sake. I am here to hold up a mirror to you, all right? So it's this. If you are still surprised by how the Yankee organization handles itself, how it handles just about anything, how it handles slumps, how it handles players having bad games or bad plays, how it handles public criticism, that's on you, because this is not new. This is who the Yankees are. And at this point, there is not going to be any public accountability anywhere. So let's start on the surface, and I think this is where most fans focus. Aaron Boone. He is the public face of this team. He's the guy that sits in front of the cameras every day, before games, after games, talks about what's going on with the team. And more often than not, he talks around what's going on with the team. Aaron Boone could walk out of the clubhouse and it was on fire. And he would say, well, it's a little warm, but most days it's not warm like that. That is his default setting. So after another game riddled with errors, another sloppy performance in Toronto on Wednesday night, a night where the Yankees showed once again that they have defensive lapses and they are playing poorly, and this is not just a blip, you knew that what he was going to say, that's what he says. The fact that we're 100 games into the season and this is not the beginning of the year and it's just an aberration, no, we've seen this story before. That's not a random blip. That's not just two weird series. There's a pattern. But of course, Boone doesn't talk about patterns. He talks about isolated incidents. He talks like a guy managing a spring training game. But Boone doesn't talk about patterns. There is a very large separation. There's the Yankee organization and there's everybody else. And anybody who's not part of the Yankee organization, it's almost like they don't deserve answers. The Yankees have the answers. They will fix it. They will handle it. They're the experts. As I said in the previous episode, the Yankees often wrong, but never in doubt. So when Aaron Boone answers the questions the way he answers them, you have to know at this point, he's not going to ever publicly call out a player. He's never going to admit that something is wrong. And that's not a bug. That's by design, because Aaron Boone is not really the problem. He's a symptom. Aaron Boone is doing exactly what the Yankees want him to do. This is a top-down philosophy from Brian Cashman, and it's top-down, I guess, from Hal Steinbrenner, too. The Yankees want to be a stress-free organization for the players. They don't want any tension. They don't want tough love. They don't want public accountability. They want calm. They want positive vibes only. They want to be pro-player in every way possible. And look, in a vacuum, as I've explained before, I understand the approach, the way that George used to handle things by firing people every single year. That wasn't the right approach. You don't want to be firing managers on a whim. You don't want to be dragging guys through the media day after day, time after time. You don't want the media to know, hey, call George Steinbrenner when something's going wrong because he'll give you a headline. So I get that. But the Yankees haven't just walked away from that style. They've overcorrected so much in the other direction that it doesn't feel like there's a pulse. There's no edge, there's no urgency, and there's no accountability. And they don't see it as a problem. And the fact that you see it as a problem, well, you don't know because you're not the Yankees. So the media doesn't know, the fans don't know, nobody knows but them. They're the experts, not you. So if you were waiting for some kind of correction after last year's World Series debacle, if you thought, well, this is a point where they're going to have to change. No, that's on you at this point. They are not going to change. Nothing is going to change. This is how they handle things. So if you're still getting upset by it, that's a you problem. So let's talk a little bit about culture, because the Yankees have made it clear they are never going to even mildly criticize a player on their team. Doesn't matter if it's a rookie, doesn't matter if the guy's making $30 million. The tone is always going to be the same. Supportive, optimistic, patient. Take Anthony Volpe, perfect example. The golden child. Organization loves him. Aaron Boone loves him, despite the fact that he's been terrible by all metrics and measures. And it's not like this is just suddenly a blip. This is year 3 as a regular, and going into Wednesday night's game, among players with 1,500 plate appearances in that span, he ranked dead last in batting average, on base percentage, and OPS. So that's not a slump, that's his career. But Boone is never going to be honest about it. He's never going to flip out and have that moment where he's mad as hell and he's not going to take it anymore, because that's the only threat to his job if he does not stay on message. So when he makes more errors or he has more bad strikeouts, that'll just be a blip until they finally get to a moment where he does something good and he can point and say, well, see, he's fine. Of course, he's not fine. And anyone watching with clear eyes knows that. But if you have clear eyes, you have to realize this is who the Yankee organization is at this point. They protect, they insulate, and they don't hold anyone accountable publicly. And really, let's be honest, from what we can see, they don't do it privately either. I keep hearing, well, we don't know what happens behind the scenes. That's true, we don't. But I'll counter with whatever is being said or done behind closed doors, it's not working. It's not working with Volpe, just like it didn't work with Gary Sanchez, just like it didn't work with Aaron Hicks, just like it didn't work with Joey Gallo, just like it didn't work with Josh Donaldson. And more importantly, it's kind of hard to believe that there's this fiery, hard-nosed version of Aaron Boone who's getting in people's faces behind the curtain, especially when he's more defensive in press conferences than his infield is on the field. Have you ever noticed that? Boone has a shorter fuse for any question or even mild criticism than he does about his team's actual performance. The errors don't get him upset. The questions about the errors do. So he pushes back on questions. He'll bristle when he's asked about sloppiness. He gets annoyed when people point out the facts. Just in the same way Brian Cashman does. This is who the Yankee organization is. This is the culture. This is the Yankee way now. So to me, Aaron Boone is really not the problem. Brian Cashman is the problem, because this is all his design. Boone is not acting on his own. He's doing exactly what Brian Cashman wants. He's protecting the players. He's managing the media. He's diffusing the pressure. He's steering the ship exactly the way Cashman wants it steered. So for anyone who is clinging to the idea that Boone could do anything in terms of in-game decisions or performance of players is going to get him fired, wake up. The Yankees will never do that anymore. Not now, not ever again. Not as long as Brian Cashman is the person running the organization, because that would be admitting a mistake. They don't do that. That would create tension. That would be messy. And messy is one thing this version of the Yankees can't tolerate. This is not George Steinbrenner's Yankees anymore. This is the overcorrection. This is not World Series or bust. This is let's be competitive every year and see if we can win one once in a while. They don't want chaos. They want stability, even if that stability means kind of mediocrity. Also, one other thing that I keep seeing that I can't believe anyone would actually believe, they're not going to go all in on the deadline. Spoiler alert, that's not what the Yankees do. So if you have any thoughts that Spencer Jones or Cam Schlittlitter is going to get traded away, or they're going to be dangled in some aggressive blockbuster, forget it. Forget about that. I don't even know if that would be the right move. It would depend on what you're getting back. But Cashman doesn't trade his top prospects almost ever, right? Like, who's the last top prospect he has ever traded away? In fairness to him, he doesn't have a Pete Crow Armstrong situation on his hands. That's what the Yankees did back when George was running the show. And as we've already cleared up, the Yankees are operating in the direct opposite way of that. So they're not going to trade away their top prospects, especially not for some guy at the trade deadline this year. So if you're a fan hoping some big win now move, let's go get a title, that's not who the Yankees are anymore. They're interested in sustained success. They'll tell you the playoffs are a crapshoot. And that'll be the narrative again this fall when they flame out in the division series or they lose in the wild card round, whatever. This is who the Yankees are now. And if you fail to recognize it, yes, it's a problem for the Yankees, but it's really a problem for you. If you can't recognize where this organization is at, that is a you problem. So if you can't live with that, I get it. But unless Hal Steinbrenner ever wakes up and demands change, which is never going to happen, unless someone finally inside the building says, you know what, good is no longer good enough, nothing is going to change. So again, if you can't recognize that and notice it, that is on you, not on Aaron Boone. He's doing exactly what he's expected to do, and that's the way he stays employed.
Marketing for a sports team? Can't quite think of a way to engage loyal fans as much as you would like? This is where a .vote web address comes in. Allow for fans to help decide player of the game, player of the week, or MVP of a season. There are hundreds of ways you can conduct polls for fan engagement that benefits both the organization and the fan base. Visit www.godaddy.com and purchase www.yourteam.vote.
All right, so let's move on to the WNBA conversation following their All-Star game, which, was supposed to be a celebration of the sport in Indiana to capitalize on Caitlin Clark's popularity. But instead, of course, it went sideways. With Clark injured and sidelined, it seemed like that weekend was more about Shane Gillis's jokes at the ESPYs, and then, of course, players showing up to the game with T-shirts that read, "Pay us what you owe us." So instead of a celebration of the sport and how far it's come, it became combative in the public eye with a conversation about the league's collective bargaining agreement and the negotiations. And if we're being honest, most people arguing about that new CBA and the players asking for more money and the league not making any money, from both sides, it feels like people are just recycling the same old talking points. But here's the thing. I think both sides are missing the bigger picture. So let me start by saying this and being completely transparent. I am not a fan of the WNBA. Never have been. I don't say that to be disrespectful. I just say it to be honest. If you're used to, like I am, watching the athleticism of the NBA or even Division I men's college basketball, the level of play, the skill level in the WNBA is just glaringly lower. Summer league basketball is faster. It's more explosive. It's simply a higher, more dynamic version of the sport. So if you're turning into the WNBA, if you're a WNBA fan, chances are you're not doing it because you're craving the best basketball product in the world. You're watching it because you want to watch women play basketball. Maybe you have a daughter that plays, maybe you played, maybe you believe in supporting women's sports, and that's cool, that's fine. But let's at least be honest about what we're watching and why we're watching it. Now, with that said, clearly, the reason that the WNBA is in this moment, the reason we're even talking about this league at all, is based on one person, Caitlin Clark. For 26 years, no one anywhere talked about the WNBA. The last 2 years have generated more buzz, more discussion, and clearly more media coverage than the previous 26 years combined. And it's not because of a league-wide movement. It's not because of a dozen new stars emerged at once. It's Caitlin Clark, period. During the All-Star game, ESPN tried to make it out like this year's ratings were up. They're not. Their graphics showed where the ratings were 2 years ago, before Caitlin Clark entered the league. So let me also be clear. If the NBA succeeds, great. If it fails, it's not a big deal to me. I have no stake in the outcome, which is why I think exactly I can have a more honest conversation about the league's CBA negotiations without getting caught up in the usual emotion. All right, so let's talk about that, because this narrative that the league doesn't make any money or the players shouldn't be asking for more, that argument is outdated and it's largely irrelevant. Yes, the WNBA has never made a profit. Reports are it lost $40 million last year. But here's the real problem. It's not the league's current balance sheet that matters the most. It's how they got to where they are right now. The structure of the WNBA's ownership and its finances, that's where people should be focusing. Because for 25 years, the NBA floated the WNBA, putting about $10 million a year to keep it alive, because for the NBA, it was a long-term business play. Newsflash, lots of businesses don't make money for long periods of time. Uber didn't make money for a long period of time. So that investment by the NBA, it gave them something to show TV partners during the summer. It made them look good publicly by promoting women's sports. And if that league ever popped, like it's starting to now, it becomes a pretty valuable property. The problem, the price for that support was control, though. Today, the NBA owns 42% of the WNBA. Team owners in the league collectively own another 42%. And then the remaining 16 belongs to an outside group of investors, which includes Nike and some other sports business heavyweights. They chipped in $75 million back in 2022. So here's the real problem. Even with that $2 billion TV deal on the table, less than half of that money will actually make it into the WNBA's pockets because the league doesn't control the business the way other leagues do, like the NBA or the NFL or baseball. So they can't split revenues 50-50 with the players like they're saying because it doesn't even get 100% of its own revenue. So that's the part I think a lot of people on both sides are missing. There are hard facts that people miss, especially fans of the sport who want to see the players get paid more. Then there's another part, and it's where I think the WNBA players, or at least whoever is advising them, are really screwing this up. Because when you've got players walking around wearing shirts that say, "Pay us what you owe us," that's not pay us a fair wage or let's negotiate a better deal. That's basically saying, hey, you guys are screwing us and we demand payment. That doesn't come across as leverage. That comes across as entitlement. When you are a fringe league, still dependent on one star for most of your visibility and still struggling to establish financial independence and still looking to grow your fan base, the optics matter. Perception is reality. And the message you're sending to fans, especially casual fans, should matter a lot. So what the WNBA players should be doing is framing this moment as a shared breakthrough, as in, hey, look, we've helped get the league to a place it's never been before. Let's work together to keep it going. Instead, the vibe is, hey, we finally got attention, now cough up the money. That's a really bad look. And it turns a good portion of the sports fan base against you. Now, the players are going to get raises. The new media deal alone will bring in $200 million a year, and it looks like their money will keep coming. But that doesn't mean they're all going to be making millions of dollars next year. That's just not realistic. But they will get better conditions, permanent chartered flights, better health and family benefits, expanded rosters, longer all-star breaks. Those are tangible quality of life improvements. And honestly, they make more sense for where the league is at this point. So the NBA is maybe on the verge of something big, but this CBA could last longer than Caitlin Clark's career. And the fact that she's been so injured in this second season should concern anybody who's investing in this league. Her success is instrumental long term. And if the players and the league can't get on the same page, if they can't match their ambition with reality, then they could blow this whole deal. And even as someone who's not a fan, I can recognize that would be a shame. Even for someone like me who doesn't watch, who doesn't care whether it survives really or not, even I can recognize how rare this moment is. Let's be honest. If they butcher this moment, they might not get another one. It took them 28 years to get this opportunity. So as I said before, I can't imagine that the players would blow this chance. But when you see how tone deaf they have been in these examples, I guess you can't completely rule it out. All right, finally, one last story to talk about, and it's something that is happening at LA Chargers training camp that on the surface looks like one of those silly stories you hear about in training camp because we're just so desperate for football to return and we're looking for any angle to read about it. But I'm telling you, this Justin Herbert red eye story, it might actually be significant. So here's what's happening. Herbert has been wearing red-tinted contact lenses during training camp. Prescription lenses, UV protected, and they look like he's like a vampire or certainly demonic. And of course, everybody's made the same jokes. But this could have some actual significance. And no one's talking really about how meaningful this could be. Because this is not just some like style choice or a PR stunt. Herbert is wearing these because he's sick of squinting in the sun. So he has blue eyes, and if you didn't know, people with blue eyes are more sensitive to bright light. Scientifically, people with blue eyes let in more light. So if you're a quarterback, especially playing in Southern California, constantly battling sun glare and squinting while trying to read a defense, that's a legit disadvantage. So a couple of years ago, he tried to wear a tinted visor, but he didn't like it. He said he constantly had to wipe it off and there was just too much maintenance. So now he's trying something new, red contacts that basically act like sunglasses for your eyeballs. He says they help him feel more comfortable, more focused, and more importantly, he's not squinting as much. And once he puts them in, he doesn't have to think about it, unlike the visor. But here's the thing, he's been dealing with this the whole time. Imagine trying to make an NFL throw while squinting into sunlight. Now, he says he wants to wear them in games, and this is where it gets interesting because that might not be legal. With visors, there's already rules, right? You need league approval, especially for tinted ones. One of the big reasons is concussion protocol. Medical staff often use the eyes, right? Pupil dilation tracking as part of diagnosing a head injury. And if your eyes are covered or tinted, it could complicate that process. You need to get approval. And even though the contacts are inside the eye, if they're altering the appearance enough to make it hard for trainers to do their job, that might be an issue. He can do whatever he wants during training camp because there are no real rules there. So right now, this is just a practice story, but what happens if the NFL says no? Or what if the league approves this by the time the season rolls around and Herbert has this breakout season? Because let's be honest, this is a make or break season for Justin Herbert. For all the talent and the arm strength and all the hype, you have to be honest, at this point, starting to lose a little faith that he will ever be that guy, that elite level quarterback. But if he does get approved and this thing works, you're going to see a whole lot more quarterbacks trying it. You're going to see this become a thing. So the fact that this is the Chargers and this is Justin Herbert, I think that a lot of people look at this story when they see it and they think it's just this wacky training camp side note. But I think that that would be a mistake. This is not just some guy being weird. This is a quarterback under pressure looking for an edge and looking to remedy an issue that he has had on the field when he knows this year really matters. So I definitely think that this is an important story and not just one of these training camp things that gets a chuckle. So how this whole thing plays out, I definitely think this is a story, for lack of a better word, that is worth keeping an eye on. All right, that is going to do it for another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. If you have not already, please hit that subscribe button, share the episode with a friend, and we will be back next week with a fresh episode of Gordon Damer on Sports.